Welcome back, loves. I have a fun topic for you today. It's very simple consistency culture. And you may be wondering, what is she talking about and what made her even think of titling an episode this way? And I'm going to tell you, it came from a lot of personal experiences I've had since we moved to Maine. And just over the years, my difficulty in being consistent in certain areas or what I deemed to be consistent, what I measured as consistency based on what other people told me I should be doing. So I think this will be helpful to you if you are struggling with the topic of consistency in any area of your life. Maybe going to therapy, maybe attending that yearly annual physical with your PCP. Maybe it's consistency in the gym. Maybe it's consistency in going to church or eating a certain way. Whatever the case may be, if you have ever struggled with consistency, this episode is for you. Happy to bring it to you. And so I was thinking, what is the actual definition of consistency? And when I looked on Google, it said consistency in life means being steady and reliable in your actions, habits, and attitudes, which is key to building habits, achieving goals, and gaining credibility. That last part, right? Because when you're consistent in certain things, people begin to rely on you. They see you achieving goals. They see you, let's just take the gym. They see you going to the gym every week and they say, wow, I want to be more like you, right? You become credible in certain areas of your lives. And I just think, though, that consistency culture has become toxic in many ways. And that's really what I want to focus on. So, consistency involves making regular, committed efforts, even the small ones, over time to build momentum. And hopefully, you can achieve a desired outcome. And I think that where this gets toxic at is when you think about what certain gurus say online, right? They might be wellness coaches, mindset coaches, people who are experts in their field. You have people who are labeled as celebrities or public figures, and they give you some advice on something, and a lot of people are inclined to take it. Especially if you consume a lot of their content, the algorithms are definitely going to feed you more of it. And at one point, I was getting a lot of content about getting up at a certain time because I was searching for a morning routine. What's the morning routine that's going to help me be the most productive and ultimately the most rich? How can I become wealthy, right? Well, you got to develop a wealth mindset. Okay, well, what are the steps though? If you are looking for that content online, you're going to undoubtedly find some content about your morning routine and how you need to get up early. I think there's a book. What is it called? It's by Hal Elroyd. It's about a morning routine. I'm going to have to figure out the name of that book before the end of this episode. But yeah, I even read that book because I was thinking, how can I do what these other people are doing? Like, clearly, I'm not accomplishing enough. I have two kids, I have a business. I'm just not doing enough. I need to do more. So actually, it's called The Miracle Morning. I just Googled it. He's a number one best-selling author and keynote speaker. And I thought, well, his book is pretty popular. Let me read that. And he goes through, different things you can do to create a morning routine. I'm just going to cut to the chase. I tried it maybe for a few days. Maybe I did it a week. I don't remember. I'll be honest, though, I wasn't consistent, or what most people would say consistent was. They used to say it took 21 days to build a habit. I don't even know what it is now, but I know that they came out and said, oh, it actually takes more than 21 days. So yeah, if you like me have ever struggled with your morning routine, this episode is for you too, because you start searching and you'll get a lot of content. You'll get some people that say, you know what? Get up at 4 a.m. Get up at 5 a.m. Get up before the sun rises. Do your devotional if you're religious, do your exercise, get it all out of the way, and then you start your day. Then you eat your breakfast. I've tried all of this, y'all. And I like to think that I'm a pretty consistent person. The people in my life, such as my family, friends, my sister, my parents, my clientele in my psychotherapy practice, they know me as consistent, right? If you schedule an appointment, I'm going to show up. If my family texts me or calls me, they know that I'm going to hop on it. I'm going to support in any kind of way. Yet I wasn't able to get consistency with a morning routine. And once you have kids, it's it's kind of hard not to, right? There are certain things I'd love to do, such as get up early and get my exercise out the day. I've tried for years. And then I decided it's just not going to work for me, not at this stage in life. And we're going to talk about that too, because your stage of life has a lot to do with how consistent you can be with anything you're working on. And for me, the years where I've struggled with sleep and even still sometimes struggle to get to bed on time because I have one child who likes to stay up really late and, has some overstimulation things going on. And so my husband and I do a lot of work to help that particular child get to bed. Well, that means we're getting into bed late. and that spills over to the next morning. And before you send me your recommendations, we just bought a product. If anyone is interested, I'm not an affiliate of this company or anything. We literally just got the product yesterday. Both of our kids slept with the product on last night, and it's supposed to help with overstimulation and sleep. And so far, so good. One night in, we have a 30-day trial. So if you have a child who struggles with overstimulation and you're curious to know what this product is, feel free to reach out to me and I am happy to share. Again, I don't have an affiliate link. I get nothing from it, but just to share. So yeah, I over the years just have not gotten a lot of rest. I've been a parent for 10 years. And so me getting up at 4 or 5 a.m., not gonna happen. I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you I'm doing it. I roll out of bed at 6:30, sometimes 6:45. I have two different alarms. And I've just decided that in this stage of life with two young kids and, the lack of rest that I sometimes get, no matter what I do to prepare, it's just not going to happen because I don't want to get up at 4 a.m. and exercise. I don't want to do that at 5 a.m. And sometimes, y'all, I don't even have the energy to do it after I've dropped my second kid off at school. Since we moved to Maine, they're no longer at the same school. So I have two drop offs. And sometimes I just sit in the parking lot of my son's school for about 30 minutes after he goes in. And I'm just sitting there scrolling on the internet, sometimes listening to something motivational, sometimes doing my devotional, sometimes just breathing, sometimes just congratulating myself for getting through the morning routine, right? Because my husband's already at work by the time I'm doing all of that with them. So, am I consistent though? I'd like to think so. This is what consistency looks like for me. So, hopefully by the end of this episode you will be encouraged to redefine what consistency looks like to you. All right. So, but again, let's talk about how toxic it's gotten. And I mentioned Hal Elroy's book, The Miracle Morning. I'm not saying his book is toxic, by the way. I think it is good that we have so many options of people saying, hey, here's how I was able to create a morning routine or a nighttime routine. Here's how I was able to get more structured. I love that, right? I'm just saying that it's not a one size fits all. And that's one takeaway I want you to have when it comes to being consistent. I'll give you the perfect example. Years ago, I was looking at strategies for people with ADHD. I have several clients who struggle with ADHD. I know several people whose children struggle with ADHD, some of my clients' children, and I was looking to learn more. And there was this mom that got online and she said, you know what, instead of trying to fit my children, let's just say we have a square and we're trying to fit it into a circle, right? She said she doesn't do that. And she showed how she literally just has a basket and all of the clothes are clean and none of the clothes are folded. Now, if you've been listening long enough, you know that I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I don't like clothes just slung anywhere. Everything has a spot, right? I'm very clean, very organized and neat. And everything is folded, nice and neat, right? I have a husband who doesn't fold the way I fold. I have two kids who don't fold the way I fold, right? And so that mom's video really inspired me because I thought, well, yeah, why are we trying to tell kids that they have to fold it a certain way? Now, is it good to build that habit, to have some consistency in washing, drying, and folding your clothes? Absolutely. And I still do that. And if you notice for yourself, or maybe you have children who struggle with their organizational skills, or maybe their ADHD and tidiness is not their strength, then if the clothes are folded and they're put away, then can you be okay with that? Right. So that video really made me think differently about how we deal with certain things in our lives as adults and how we teach these things to our children and whether or not we're willing to have more flexibility with them and ourselves. Okay. So when we think about the food pyramid, for years, it said consuming certain things in moderation, right? Consistency in this area is going to look different for everyone. And when we talk about consuming things in moderation, right, they're typically talking about your candies, your certain types of fats, things with cholesterol, right? Your saturated fats, I believe. I'm no dietitian or nutritionist, so don't take my word for it. What it boils down to is, how often are you eating those things? Someone might say, well, I have candy every day. Does that mean I'm not eating in moderation? And other people may say, well, I'm eating candy only one time a week, right? And I'm not judging anyone's diet here. I'm just using this as an example. But what does moderation even look like, right? I think we should start dissecting these things and trying to see whether or not what we're being told actually fits into the lifestyle we're building for ourselves and the lifestyle we want too. I'm sorry, I don't want to get up at 4 or 5 a.m. to exercise. I just don't want to. I tried it before. And guess what? Snooze. It didn't work. That's just not an area I'm going to be able to be consistent in. I do think it is important, though, that you find some areas you're super consistent in, even if it's not about organization or how you eat or when you exercise or whatever, fill in the blank, right? And for me, if I had to tell you right now what I'm very consistent in, it's these five things. Giving my all into parenting, that is something that is a non-negotiable for me and something that has proven to be worth it. Of course it is. They're kids, right? They deserve for us to give them our best. What I mean by worth it is I see that my kids appreciate how much I put into them. And they often tell me, even this morning, I was taking my son to his braces consultation and he had to stay home a little longer, right? And he got to spend more time with me after we dropped off my daughter. And he said, "Do I have another hour with you before you take me to school?" And I said, "Well, it's closer to an hour and a half." And he said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, yeah, you get to spend time with your boring mommy." And he said, "Oh, you're not boring." And I said, "I'm not." And he said, "No, you're a really fun mommy." And that just made me happy because I thought about the laser tag we played while we were headed upstairs to do everyone's hair this morning. So, like, I really try to find these moments to just insert playfulness and kindness. And, sometimes I just say, "Can I grab your cheeks?" And I look at them and say, "You are intelligent." And I'll say it in Spanish too, because they were in a bilingual program for years in Florida before we moved here. So I'll say, "Tú es muy inteligente." And I'll kind of test their knowledge to see if they still remember. And they say, "Oh, I'm very intelligent." So we just have these moments, and that's not it. I'm scheduling all these appointments. If there's anything that seems off, I'm making sure to take care of it. Before I took him for his braces consultation, we stopped at the eye center to schedule him an eye exam. So I put so much into nurturing them. I'm super consistent in that. No one can take that from me. And maybe you're consistent in that too. So the second thing that I'm very consistent in is collaborating with my husband to nurture our marriage and our kids. And that one can be a little more challenging when you have kids because the marriage tends to go by the wayside. And certainly when they were younger, it did not feel like we were prioritizing us at all. And once we got our bearing and really understood what this thing looked like, this whole parenting role, we have made a commitment to working on ourselves individually and working on our marriage. And I see the payoff with that. I Entering our marriage, I wasn't a very affectionate person. That's something he asked me to work on. I'm so much better with that. I can give and receive affection more. And I'm proud of that because that takes me consistently saying, "Hey, I know I can go days without a hug. I really can. And the people in my life, they can't." So let me be consistent with that. So that's just one example, but we've done marital therapy before. We have check-ins when we have issues. We check in with one another before we bring it up. "Hey, there's something I want to bring up. This is the topic. If now's not a good time, let me know." And usually it's, "Yeah, let's talk about it now. Let's get it out there in the open." So I'm really consistent at that. The third thing I'm really consistent in is committing to caring for myself so that I don't leave me on the back burner. And I certainly have at times. And I have noticed my energy get depleted. And certainly, in the 40s, there are hormonal things that go on too. So I can only do so much. I can do what I can do though. That's the thing. And so I consistently take my supplements. I consistently meet with healthcare providers at least once a year. With my dentist and my hygienist, I meet with them multiple times a year. Like, let's make sure everything's okay with my teeth and gums because gum recession is real as you age, and just making sure I maintain all of the cosmetic work I've had done over the years. So I'm consistent in that. Now, am I perfectly consistent? No, there are times where I've gone a month and I'm like, I haven't scheduled that appointment, such as, the transition to moving from Florida to Maine. That was big because I had to keep a running list of appointments that neither of us were going to be up to date on because we had to move. And it took a while to find providers. So some would say, "Oh, well, you weren't consistent because you were a month late on those." No, that's still consistent because I was on top of it. So even if you're on top of things, it's not getting done right when you want it to. You're on top of it. You're still being consistent. Give yourself credit. Okay. And the fourth thing I'm really consistent is practicing the skills I teach others. Living with an obsessive compulsive disorder diagnosis and a generalized anxiety diagnosis and a history of major depressive disorder. I'm talking about me. If you haven't been listening long enough, I have to stay on top of my mental health. When I am in therapy, I am very consistent in therapy. I'm not currently in therapy. If you know, you know, once you move to a different state, if your current therapist isn't licensed there by that state's board, then you have to find a new one. That's the ethical thing to do. Okay. So I need to find a new therapist here. That's on my list. I've highlighted several therapists that I want to reach out to at some point. Right now, we're moving through the braces consultation. We're moving through my medical appointment I have tomorrow morning. There's some things that I'm being followed on. So yeah, but I'm on it. I'm on it. I have these things scheduled. I have running lists of things that need to be done. So when it comes to taking care of myself and encouraging other people to take care of their mental, and emotional and physical needs, I do that too for me. I turn that mirror around at the end of the day and say, are you practicing what you're teaching others? Yes, I am. I can confidently say that. And the fifth thing I'm really consistent in is supporting those who ask for my support. And even when they don't, intuitively asking how I can help. And I'm really proud of that because I have an intuition and because I try to stay grounded and practice mindfulness and I have a heightened sense of awareness. I can sense when other people might have needs. And so when I'm close to people, I will say, hey, just throwing this out there. If you ever need to talk, if you want to run that by someone, if you just need to vent, if you want my support in strategizing around anything, and this is in my personal life, by the way, obviously I'm doing these things in my therapy practice. I'm a listener, right? A listener and help people find creative ways to solve their own problems. And in my personal life, I want to show up for people in that way too. So I'm doing that. These are just a few things I'm consistent in. I just wanted to give you five. Now, if you were listening to my consistent areas and you thought, I do some of that too, I want you right now to lift your hand and pat yourself on the back. I'm not going to do it because you would hear it in this mic. No matter how much this pop filter works, you would hear it. And it might not sound so great. Pat yourself on the back. You're doing a great job. Even if you don't consistently get in to work on time because you struggle with ADHD, even if you don't consistently take your medication, even if you don't consistently go to therapy once a week or twice a week, maybe it's been 3 months and you've thought, uh-oh, now that I'm listening to Marquita on this podcast, I need to make an appointment. The fact that you have all these other areas of consistency is what I really want you to congratulate yourself on and take credit for that. So, speaking of consistency in therapy, by the way, some experts say weekly, bi-weekly, and some therapists even have minimum requirements when you enter their practice. And I've certainly had new clients say, I was told that I have to, come once a week and that doesn't work for my schedule. And I'll be honest with people, based on what their presenting issues are, hey, if you were able to come in once a week, you're probably going to see your growth accelerate in ways that you might not if you're only able to do twice a month or once a month. However, it's your budget. This is you carving out time in your schedule for you. And when you can do that, I'm here for you. Now, certainly, if I see that those symptoms are not improving and you're worsening, I'm going to encourage you to try to see if you can come in more. I don't have a minimum requirement though. And that's just in my practice. I'm not judging what other people do in their practice. So some people say that consistency is once a week, twice a week, once a month. I have clients who meet with me once a quarter. Guess what? That's consistent because they're in maintenance mode. I have clients who pop up. I had a client recently who popped up and we hadn't met in almost 2 years. And this person was consistently doing well mentally and something popped up. So they scheduled an appointment. So that's consistent. So you ever notice how the gyms don't have like a minimum requirement for how often you should come in? Even consistency in the gym looks different for everyone. So I just want us to get out of this mindset of putting this very strict definition around consistency because that culture is killing us mentally and causing us to strive for perfectionism in areas that we shouldn't be striving for it in. And we can't be perfect anyway. So what are we doing? What are we doing, y'all? So, yeah, in terms of consistency, I want to encourage you to write a list out. Maybe write 5 things. Don't overwhelm yourself. What are 5 areas that you are consistent in? Even if they overlap with the areas that I shared, I'm very consistent in. And then I want you to ask yourself, how? How have I been able to be consistent in these areas? What has allowed me to do that? Has it been an energy thing? Is it I value being an amazing parent, so I'm just consistent? Is it that you value fidelity so much that, you go hard when it comes to your marriage, and so you're not only faithful to the marital process, you're also just faithful? You don't practice infidelity and you strive to make sure that that connection is there so that neither of you feel like there's some emptiness. And this is not me poking fun at infidelity, by the way. Plenty of people go through it and it's a challenge for people to overcome. And I do believe that, people can heal from that and work through it if they desire. And if they desire to leave, that's their business too. Okay. That's their prerogative. I'm just saying though, there are certain things we have to be consistent in. And there are certain things that we can get away with not being as consistent in. So if you have that list of 5 areas where you really have some strong consistency, really take a look at why and see if you can put it into other areas of your life where you lack consistency. That may also help with procrastination and you just getting things done overall. So, as always, I hope this episode was helpful for you. And if you believe it could be helpful for a friend, please do share. And if you are looking for a professional speaker who focuses on mental health and motivation to come and speak about consistency, to come and speak about breaking up perfectionism and changing your mindset around your habits and just living a better life, the life you deserve, then feel free to reach out to me on marquitamyrick.com. I have a section for professional speaking. You can fill out a form there and request to have me at your next event. I would love to talk to you and any community you have built to share more about this topic. Have an amazing day and thank you for listening. The Anxiety and Free podcast is sponsored by Find My Therapist, connecting you with therapists at findmytherapist.us. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need it. Tune in next week for more conversations on navigating mental health and finding your freedom.